stream on Facebook, and then we'll get started.
Hey, looks like the streaming has started on Facebook.
Okay, it started streaming.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for our virtual coffee hour. We've got some folks here on Zoom and then also others watching on Facebook Live. So those who are tuning in whichever platform you're on, feel free to chime in using the chat or the comments on Facebook to share your questions and comments and ideas. So I'll start with a few different updates. One is that I am excited that the governor has her last State of the State address this coming Wednesday. I'm really eager to hear what she will talk about in her address. For those who might not be familiar, the State of the State address is basically an opportunity for her to talk about what is happening in Michigan, how we're doing, and lay out her plan for the rest of this year. And this is her last year in office, so I'm eager to hear what her plans are. And there's a few issues that I'm hoping that she will talk about. So we'll see what gets a mention on Wednesday evening. That's at 7 o'clock. So feel free to tune in. I know that it'll be shown on TV and will be a great way for you to hear from our governor. One update I thought that you all might be interested in, if you didn't already know, this is a really, really important tool. Attorney General Dana Nessel recently launched a new reporting form for Michiganders to report alleged misconduct by federal immigration agents in our communities. And she really created this as a response to concerns from residents across the state who have seen the harmful immigration enforcement tactics taking place in our state and in our country. And it's one of the things that we recognize is that when people's rights are being violated, it's really important that officials actually have the information about what happened, so that if there is any action to be taken, that it can be taken, because if we don't have those reports and those documents, then it's harder to do that. So please use this reporting form if you have seen or heard about or have video of or pictures of things happening in your community with regard to ICE or Border Patrol or other federal agencies for that matter, doing immigration enforcement, when you can tell that something is not right. So my team will put a link to that reporting form in the chat on Zoom and also in the comments on Facebook. So please feel free to use that. And you can put in specific incident details, descriptions of what witnesses saw, tools, weapons observed, time and location, all of those details. So please use that form. It's a great way to be able to document and share with the appropriate law enforcement officials some of that information. So another thing, just to make folks aware, it's tax season. So we do want to just remind folks about some of the different deadlines and also what some of the things that Senate Democrats, what we have been doing in the state. So the deadline to file for your income taxes is April 15th, as usual. And here in the Michigan legislature, we have been really focused on trying to make it easier for folks in Michigan to be able to start a family, to keep things going. So if you remember, a couple years ago, we passed the biggest tax break for working families in Michigan history, which actually cut working families' taxes by $1 billion total. And so that is super exciting. You do have to apply, right, for this earned income tax credit, the expanded earned income tax credit, otherwise known as the working families tax credit. So make sure that if you are unsure of how to apply for those tax credits, that you get help. Lots of great organizations out there that can help with that. In our area in Southeast Michigan, the County Aid Society is a great resource, so I encourage you to check them out. We also wanted to remind folks, do not share tax documents or earning statements via phone or social media. There's lots of scams out there, so please make sure that you're only communicating with the federal government in the official, actual channels when it comes to your taxes. Okay, next thing for folks to hear about is budget season. So every year, the state legislature works on a budget for the next fiscal year. And the way that process kicks off is that our governor releases her budget recommendation. And so that did happen last week or the week before. And so the fiscal year 2027 budget season is underway, and she included a number of really important things in her budget recommendation, including ways to address the $1.8 billion shortfall that our state is facing this coming fiscal year, which is, yes, it's a lot of money that we are going to have to deal with, that is honestly a result of some of the reckless actions of our federal administration, and also a lot of the financial pressures that folks across the state have been dealing with. But really excited that the governor's recommendation includes a number of things that the Senate also has prioritized, things like universal school meals, targeted tax relief for working families and retirees, universal pre-K. But I'm also really excited that she has included some ideas about property tax relief for seniors. So I'm eager to see, she's got a proposal. There's lots of other ideas around property tax relief for seniors. What is the way that we can make that happen in a responsible budget? I'm also really excited that the governor's recommendation included a $250 per student boost to per pupil funding. We have been every year in recent years increasing the amount per pupil funding. We know that there's still a long way to go, but we know that those investments are real and can have a huge impact. And I hope that we will continue on that road. Also excited that the governor included in her recommendation additional support for at-risk and special education students, as well as student mental health and basic safety needs, as well as before and after school programs. As a mom of 2 kids in elementary school, and lots of conversations with other school moms and dads, I just know how important all of these things really are for our students across our state, but certainly in our district as well. Also really excited that that the governor's recommendation included an expansion of the Michigan Reconnect program, which helps adult learners 21 years or older to be able to continue getting an education. That is so important, especially to be able to be successful in this job market. So definitely check out Michigan Reconnect if you haven't already. The last legislative update before I turn to a couple community updates is that I'm super excited to be part of a bill package called Kids Over Clicks. And this is a bill package that was recently introduced to try to create safer internet spaces for children and teenagers, to try to stop some of the exploitative tactics of big tech and AI companies. And so this legislation is Senate Bill 757 through 760. And it was crafted with parents and industry experts and advocates to give Michigan parents more control and transparency over their children's online activity, and also holding corporations accountable for any predatory practices that put our youth at risk. One of the things that we know from hearing anecdotes and also hearing from parents and others is that there have been too many really tragic incidents where the the activity that young people participated in online or saw online actually led to some really harmful um, behaviors or even in some cases suicide. We have heard and seen the examples of young people who were talking with AI chatbots, and those AI chatbots actually helped facilitate either the suicide note or um, how what are different ideas for suicide. And so that's really alarming. And I know that some of the companies are putting on more safeguards. We appreciate that. However, we know that there's a lot more work that we can do here. So we're really eager to make sure that we are strengthening our laws in Michigan around putting the default settings for social media platforms to be the most protective for our young people. To make that the default, I think is so important. Greater regulation over the AI chatbots so that we're not causing harm to our young people. And also making sure that we are not doing exploitative, addictive feeds for young people that we know can be pretty harmful. We are calling on Michiganders to join us in this effort. So if you are interested, we actually do have a survey that you can take to let us know your thoughts on how social media is impacting our youngest generation. So we'll put a link to the survey in the chat and you can give us your input. Hearing some audio. So hoping someone can take care of that. A couple community updates before we go to some of the questions and comments that have been coming in. I wanted to give a couple shout outs. I mentioned these in the Staying in Touch with Stephanie video on Friday, but I'll mention them again because they're really exciting. So last week, the City of Detroit's City Council passed a resolution supporting Senate Bills 508 through 510, which are our bills together with Senators Kavanaugh and Moss regarding unmasking federal agents because they should not be wearing masks when they are interacting with the members of the public. Addressing protection of schools and places of worship and hospitals and courthouses and domestic violence shelters from immigration enforcement unless there is a judicial warrant. So thank you to Detroit City Council member Gabriela Santiago Romero for her leadership on many, many issues, but especially including immigrants' rights in this moment. Her leadership is very needed and we are grateful. I also wanted to give a shout out to both Highland Park and Clawson City Council because there was an evening last week where both councils actually passed resolutions regarding ICE. And so they're a little bit similar and also a little bit different, but basically put in place some policies in those cities, Highland Park and Clawson, for interactions or not interactions with federal law enforcement, and reaffirming that local officers shouldn't be conducting immigration enforcement, they're not asking for people's immigration status, things like that. The Highland Park resolution included language about not wearing masks. So I'm really so grateful for a lot of the leadership at the local level, because I know that that is where a lot of this needs to take place right now while our federal government is, not really moving forward on some of these changes. So hopefully our partners at the federal level will continue to hold strong on demanding changes before any budget is adopted for our Department of Homeland Security. At the same time, local governments can step up, and they certainly have been in Michigan. So thank you to all the local government officials who are stepping up. The last piece that I wanted to mention from last week speaking of Southeast Michigan local governments, is actually the Oakland County Commission also passed something last week regarding county buildings and non-public areas to ensure that we don't have warrantless ICE arrests in those specific facilities in Oakland County. So great news. Thank you to Oakland County Commission members for passing that. And we can put a link in the chat to that. Okay, now let's hear people's questions. Again, feel free to put comments and questions in the chat. If you are on Zoom, and then if you're on Facebook, you can put those questions into the comment section. All right, the first comment that we've gotten so far is from Facebook, and it is from Stephen Boyle. Hi, Stephen. And his comment is, hi, Senator. I think this is supposed to be, so many people are concerned about DeQuayne Johnson. He was pulled off his bike by a canine, mauled, and shot with his hands pulled behind him like an execution. He was slain in the parking lot of where he lived in front of his neighbors. Yes, really concerned. I am, as I think some folks are aware, we have been working on issues of police brutality and trying to make necessary changes at the state level. We've been working on this for quite some time, and it has been a bit of an uphill battle. And so I was actually just talking earlier with a colleague in the House who has been leading on this, and we are eager for bills to get introduced in the House. This is something that should be, well, it has been, and I hope will continue to be, a bipartisan effort, because we know that there are plenty of not just Democrats, but also Republicans who understand that law enforcement has a responsibility to act responsibly and safely. And so while I have not gotten involved directly in this specific case, I know that there is a lot of outrage about what happened, and I hope that it can be a reminder, a very unfortunate, tragic reminder of how we need to make change at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, when it comes to the way that our law enforcement interacts with community members. So just for a little bit more detail on what we have worked on in the past and in the bills that we have reintroduced again in the Senate, that's bipartisan. We address topics such as the duty to intervene. So an officer sees another officer using excessive force, they have duty to step in. We also have bills in the package related to use of force guidelines, which is critical, chokeholds, separation records. And so the idea for that is to make sure that we need to put a stop to this situation where a cop in one agency does something wrong, they go get a job in another agency prior to that second agency having the opportunity to really actually get a hold of the records from the first agency about what went wrong, or try to close some gaps in that. And a whole lot, there's a number of other bills as well, but it is something that we have been working on for a long time, and actually did pass a number of these bills in the Senate last year, but those bills died in the House during lame duck, during a really terrible lame duck situation. But we will keep pushing, and it is really, really terrible what has continued to happen. And so I hope that more people will recognize that change is needed and help us in that push for change. All right, let's see. We got a comment on Zoom from Andrea. Hi, Andrea. And Andrea says, firstly, I'd like to thank you for your work on nursing advocacy, particularly as it relates to your involvement in committee on Senate Bills 296 and 297, and as a co-sponsor on 268. As a 268 co-sponsor, are you able to provide any updates on the status of the bill or when it will be up for a vote on the Senate floor? So I don't have all the bill numbers memorized in my head, so let me just do a real quick. But while I'm looking up, I will mention that on 296 and 297, those ones I do know what they are. Those are our nurse overtime bills, and we had a great committee hearing 2 weeks ago. And yeah, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And these bills basically would put a limitation on hospitals mandating nurses work overtime because we know that this is happening and it's really not good because nurses provide such important care, and they should not be worked to the point of exhaustion because that is not good for them and it's also not good for patients. And so we know that other states have passed bills regarding nurse overtime. The bills have gone through a number of changes to incorporate feedback from the hospitals, and I'm really hopeful that we can move those forward. Shout out to Senator Ed McBroom, Republican sponsor from the Upper Peninsula, who has been a partner on this and is a great champion for nurses and patient safety. Okay, so Senate Bill 268, I looked that up, and this is the scope of practice bill for nurse practitioners. And yes, I am a proud co-sponsor of the bill. And the bill is actually still in the Committee on Regulatory Affairs, so I do not know when that is being taken up. Thank you, that's a great question. We can certainly ask about it. And I am supportive of this. I have been supportive of this for basically, I think several terms, all the years that this bill has been introduced while I've been in the legislature. And I know that this is something that is really, really needed because we know that it can help make sure that nurse practitioners are able to use more of the training that they have to provide patient care and help to expand access to healthcare. So thank you, Andrea, for asking. And then actually the next question is related, and I think this one is about the parallel House bill. So Papia, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, their question is about House Bill 4399, which will grant nurse practitioners full practice authority in Michigan. What are some barriers to getting this bill passed? House Bill 4399 would allow APRNs to enhance access to care, reduce delays, and help address primary care provider shortages in Michigan. I hope you will consider supporting this legislation for the benefit of Michigan patients. So if I remember correctly, that House Bill 4399 is actually identical to Senate Bill 268. I will double check that, but I think that it is. So it is identical to the bill that I co-sponsored in the Senate. So yes, I am supportive because I co-sponsored the Senate bill. And definitely if that House bill moves over, we'll be eager to support it. Keep raising your voices on this issue. I know that sometimes on scope of practice legislation, it can take, unfortunately, multiple tries. I mean, honestly, on a lot of major legislation, it can take multiple tries. But I think the more that people continue to hear from nurses, I think that would be really, really great. So thank you for your advocacy. Really important. Let's see what other questions or comments are coming in. Also, I think I see on Zoom Hazel Park City Council member Alyssa Sullivan. So shout out to Hazel Park City Council. Thank you for your service. We appreciate you. Okay, the next comment is from Andrea, and the question is, are you familiar with the ICAN Act or House Bill 4246? Okay, this is designed to broaden the scope of practice for advanced practice RNs under Medicare and Medicaid. House Bill 4246 is geared towards Michigan entering the Nurse Licensure Compact, which allows RNs who are licensed in the state of Michigan to practice in other compact states and vice versa without additional licensure, which would which could potentially address the nursing shortage in the state. Um, so I think I've heard of this. I need to do some checking and see if this is what I think it is, and also need to just check. I know sometimes with compacts, there's questions about whether or not other similar states have the same kinds of rigorous requirements that Michigan does. But if it does, and if the Nurses Association is supportive, which I'm not sure, I'll have to double check, then it probably is something that I would support. So I'll just need to do a little bit more digging into the details of the content of the bill and check in with our friends over at MNA who are great partners. So let me try to check that out real quick. Yeah, I'm gonna have to, this is a little bit long, so I will look at it a little bit later and get back to you. Okay. Are there other questions or comments coming in? And while we're waiting for comments and questions, I'll ask you some questions and then you can put in your responses into the chat or if you're on Facebook on the comments so we can have a little bit of interaction. Wondering how many of you watched the Olympics and what was your favorite moment? For me, I watched like way more Olympics than I normally do for whatever reason. But like so proud of Team USA for all the great medals that they won. And I grew up watching Kristi Yamaguchi in the Olympics. I got my daughter technically, although I like it too. The Kristi Yamaguchi Barbie doll. And so Kristi Yamaguchi Barbie doll watched some of the Olympics with us too. Anyways, my favorite moment was probably Alyssa Liu winning gold. Just like so much joy on the ice, and it was such a beautiful performance. And honestly, all of the medal winners and even those that didn't win medals did just such an amazing job. So let me know in the comments or on Facebook, what was your favorite Olympic moment if you watched? And another participation question could be, given that the governor has her final State of the State address coming up in 2 days, what do you want the governor to talk about? What are some issues that you hope that she mentions that she can try to focus on in her last year as our governor? All right. Hopefully people are responding to those questions. All right, I see another question here. This is from Kimberly. Kimberly's question is, what is the status of the rumor of a potential ICE facility coming to Highland Park, Michigan? How can citizens let their voices be heard against this issue? Thank you, Kimberly. So, background for those who are like, what is happening? What is this comment about? The background is that in late December, there was a Washington Post article about, it listed, I don't know, like maybe a dozen different cities across the country as places that ICE was looking into. There was a part of this memo that they wrote about where they were looking to open up new detention centers. So there's like there's probably more than two, but there's two general categories of detention centers. So there was like these really giant big ones that hold like thousands, like 10,000 people or 5,000 to 10,000 people. And then there's also smaller ones, which honestly are still very big, other detention centers. So in Michigan, the detention center that we currently have that is that a lot of people have probably heard about by now is called the North Lake Processing Center. It's in Baldwin, Michigan. And then there's 4 county jails that currently have contracts with ICE to hold people. It's the St. Clair County Jail, the Calhoun County Jail, Chippewa County Jail, and Monroe County Jail. So those 4 plus Northlake. So this Washington Post article comes out. I'm I and Mayor Glenda McDonald, Rep. Myers Phillips, and others, all like communicating on a regular basis that late December, like over the Christmas holiday break, Christmas/holiday break, um, about this. And essentially what we find out is that there was a facility that did likely look into, but that facility is not going to become an ICE facility. It is zoned as industrial. There's currently already a company leasing that facility, and that is a long-term lease, unlikely to get changed. So through more digging, the issue evolves, and then weeks later, we realize that actually there's an address in Romulus, and then actually another address in Romulus that was the correct address in Romulus that ICE looking into. And then you may have seen the news, but they do actually now the government actually now does own a building in Romulus. However, the mayor of Romulus is opposed to an ICE detention center coming to Romulus. The city council is. This is my understanding. Senator Darren Camilleri has been doing a great job, really trying to get a handle on this. And that facility also is actually zoned as light industrial. And so it is not zoned to become a detention center. There is a protest today at 5:30 outside of Romulus City Hall. And if you are interested in attending, I encourage you to go. And I think it's a really important time for Michiganders who don't want to see ICE expanding their operations in Michigan to protest, to write letters to the editor, to reach out to your members of Congress, and of course to us at the state level as well, and the local level. To make your voices heard, because what we know is that it's not just the detention center, which has its whole other like set of problems, right, with inhumane conditions, food, access to medical care, adequate treatment. It's also the fact that that's many hundreds or thousands more people that are then being put into this mass detention and deportation scheme, which is causing so much harm in our communities, people being ripped apart from their families, Amazon Flex drivers that are just simply trying to deliver packages, small business owners, construction workers, high school students that are being taken from our communities, who very often have no criminal record whatsoever and are contributing members of our communities. And so if you believe that this is unnecessary and it's unwanted in our communities, I encourage you to use your voice and speak out, because now is the time where we need everyone to be raising their voices. So that was a long answer, but going back to Highland Park, so right now we do not believe that there are any current existing like actual concrete plans for a facility in Highland Park, but it is really important that we continue to have our eyes open and to be on the lookout for any potential changes, because we know that this current administration, this federal administration, is not transparent about what they're planning to do, and oftentimes they don't tell the truth. So it's really hard sometimes to get actual answers. But so it's very important that we are vigilant. And I have a lot of respect for Mayor McDonald in Highland Park. She has been doing a great job in stating her opposition to any ICE detention center in Highland Park. I should add that both Southfield and Grand Rapids, there are plans, I believe, for offices, not detention centers, but offices in both Southfield and Grand Rapids for ICE. And there was a great rally/press conference protest in Southfield last Tuesday that Senator Moss and Congresswoman Tlaib and Regent Jordan, well, not in his regent capacity, but Jordan Acker in his personal lawyer capacity, all spoke, and a number of faith leaders spoke as well, about how we do not want any expansion into Southfield, and honestly in any of our communities here in Southeast Michigan. So we just have to keep watching, keep looking into all of these things. It's like a little bit of like terrible whack-a-mole happening right now, but we've got to get really good about digging into all of these things and trying to find out what really is happening and stating our opposition. Okay, let's see. Jackie Kennedy Saucio put in a comment on Facebook. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name. She put her comment that says, "We need you to come and speak to our staff at Western International High School so all teachers are on board with the survey." Okay, so I'm thinking this is probably about the Kids Over Clicks survey. Yeah, that's great. Would love to. So feel free to let us know um, how we can work on that. Would love to do that. I will note that Western High School is actually not in my current district. It was in my old district, but still have lots of, still have feel a personal connection to Western High School. So happy to come, or maybe we can come along with Senator Erica Geis, who does represent that area, which is great friend, great partner. So let's do that. All right. We also have a comment from Ray about what is the status of work projects funding in the district? Any effect on Senate District 3? Okay, so if you read that comment and you're like, what is a work project? What is this about? What a work project is, without getting like super technical, when we pass a budget, sometimes there's a lot that goes into a state budget. And sometimes there are things in the budget that don't all get completed in that year, right? So we pass a budget for the fiscal year. Sometimes there are things that take longer than a year, right? Things like getting a new fire truck or expanding services or building a building or I don't know, just all types of anything you can think of. Many things take longer than a year. Lots of things take longer than a year. Many things. And so that's what a work project is like. Once you're past that initial budget year, when you continue the funding into the next year or maybe a couple years. This is normal. This happens all the time because things take time. So what's not normal is House Republicans deciding in one single committee hearing to cut work projects. This happened in December. There have since been many things that have happened: a legal opinion from the Attorney General, a lawsuit from the House Republicans, several court hearings. The next court hearing is later this week in the Court of Claims. And why does this matter? Why does it matter? And why are we talking about work projects? So why this matters is that we're talking about a significant amount of money, but not just that. We're talking about a significant number of really important community programs and projects. $645 million worth. So in our district, there are a number of projects that I know of, and there's probably even more that I don't know of that are impacted. So one example is I secured money in the budget several years ago for a fire truck for Hamtramck. There's literally a fire truck that just breaks down on scene sometimes. Like that's not good. Um, that shouldn't be happening. So we secured money for them. It takes multiple years to get a fire truck. So, while we did secure that money several years ago, and, the city's got to go through a bid process. So it does the bid process, it then signs a contract. Well, the actual building of the fire truck, like a custom fire truck, it's not like they just have like a bunch of fire trucks just available for sale. You got to get them built. It takes several years. So the fact that Hamtramck actually has like a signed purchase agreement for a fire truck, but then now does not know how they're going to pay for it unless this funding is restored is really terrible. At Wayne State, there's a great college of nursing where they were literally set to announce a really great nursing workforce program to try to test out different innovative ideas for how we can get more nurses in Michigan, how we can keep more nurses in Michigan, because we have a huge nursing shortage. That program was set to get started, and then I think literally that same day that announcement was supposed to happen, the funding got cut. So how's that helpful? It's really not. Another example is that Wayne Metro Community Action Agency, really wonderful organization, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but they were supposed to break ground this quarter on basically some renovations at the Cortland Center in Highland Park so that they can expand their Head Start services and their community programming and help with getting people assistance for their utility bills, which are rising again. And so they also had their funding cut. So those are just three examples. There's many more. I'll name one more that I can think of that's not necessarily specific to our district, but it's actually a statewide program. I have a good friend who runs an Asian American health disparities or program, and one of the things that they are trying to do, what they're supposed to be doing with the funding that we promised. An Asian American gun violence prevention effort. Their funding is also cut. So so many examples. It's been really negatively impacting a lot of organizations in our district, and so it's very challenging. In the Senate in December, we passed a supplemental budget to try to reappropriate this money back to the projects that we already said that we were going to fund. Unfortunately, that supplemental budget that we passed in the Senate is sitting in the House. And then meanwhile, the lawsuit continues. So that is the status update. All right. There is a comment from Eileen Gordon King. Today on the news, it stated that the Michigan Lottery gave $1 billion to the state for school. How is that money given and used by the schools? So that's a really great question. We haven't gotten this question in a while, but there is sometimes a little bit of a misconception about how the lottery money works. Yes, the lottery money does help the schools. However, it's not necessarily like added money on top of other money. It's just a part of the school aid budget. But it's great. People should keep buying lottery tickets and keep supporting. However, it's not necessarily like an add-on, if that makes any sense. And I know that's a little bit confusing because I was not voting age when this was passed, I think, but my understanding is the way that this was promoted was that it sounded like it was going to be more money for school, than that's not exactly the way that it works. So hopefully that's helpful information. I'm not telling you to stop buying lottery tickets. Keep supporting the lottery. It is helpful, but wanted to just make sure people are clear on how that works. There's probably a good summary somewhere of this. But in the meantime, feel free to put more questions into the chat. Sorry, that was so, yeah, I know it's people get really confused about the lottery. It is a little bit confusing. Bridge, Michigan actually did a kind of a nice article about this. So let me actually put this in the chat. Well, actually, I'll put it in here, and then my team can put it in the chat, so that in Facebook. All right. What other questions do people have? What other suggestions? All right, we got a couple more here. I think there's what are we doing? I think so we can better support our communities with vulnerable children and adults. I ask because we see that we are doing property tax relief for elderly, which I'm happy to hear. But what about families who have loved ones who have impairments? Some people cannot work and care for their loved ones because of how complex their needs are. Thank you. I appreciate this comment a lot, actually, because I totally agree. So there's sort of a couple different things to say about this, I think. Since you mentioned the property taxes, I will note that we actually, not we. I introduced a bill. I've actually introduced this bill, I think, every term possibly that I've been in the legislature. Um, that is around freezing property taxes for longtime seniors, which is part of the thing, but also, hold on a second. I have several different bills that I've introduced around property taxes and rent, and now I might be getting them combined in my head. There's one around longtime seniors as well as people who've been in their homes for a long time who are low income, but not low income enough to qualify for the poverty exemption. That would basically freeze their property taxes. Hopefully that helps. Although we need the bill to move forward. We've also introduced legislation in the past, although I don't think I've reintroduced it yet this term, around rent stabilization for seniors and people with disabilities. And so this came out of the idea that we have, well, first of all, so in Michigan, um, this is important to know. So in Michigan, during the Engler years, the state passed a law banning local governments from creating their own local policies regarding rent, anything, rent stabilization, rent regulation, and whatever you want to call it. So cities like Detroit or Hazel Park or anywhere, they cannot pass ordinances creating rent stabilization or limiting rent in any way. Um, which I think is a mistake, and that law needs to get repealed. And we have actually introduced legislation to repeal that in the past. But what I also did was work on a bill that would basically allow local governments to create rent stabilization just for seniors and people with disabilities. Like if it's too hard to do a straight up repeal, which I think we should still do, then well, here's another option. Um, but I think your question is not just about property tax relief. What I hear you saying is that we just generally need to do more to help people who have loved ones who have a disability or complex medical needs. Um, and I totally agree. Some things that we have done over the years is well, not try to, we did actually increase, I'm going to totally, I'm hoping to get the word this correctly. We have increased in the past the payment to direct care providers, um, but we need to do more than that. And then I also know that there have been issues with um, family members caregiving for their loved ones, having challenges finding someone to provide um, that support when the family member is not available. We had a woman come to one of my most recent in-person coffee hours that was talking about this because of how complex the needs are. She's been having trouble finding an organization that has this, whatever the reasons that they have stated to her, they are not able to provide the care. And we also know that this can be really challenging financially to navigate as well. So thank you for raising that. And if you have suggestions about things that we can do on this front, we'd really love to hear that. Okay, we got another comment here from Stephen that says Detroit appears to be considering some type of sales tax to supplement the drop in property taxes. Are you assisting municipal governments in examining different forms of taxes? Detroit contracted the CRC for 2 studies. Yes, I am aware, and I have actually been in conversations with Council Member Letitia Johnson, as well as a number of local residents in Detroit who have been working on this idea of local option sales tax. We've been talking for like over a year, probably maybe, yeah, well over a year. And so I'm really glad that the Citizens Research Council studies are out now. There's 2 different studies, as you've mentioned. I think one is more, if I remember correctly, one is more entertainment tax focused, and the other is like more generally local option sales tax. For those of you who are wondering, why are we even talking about local option sales tax? Um, that's a short question with a very long answer, but I would say, to like in short, Because local governments right now are struggling, like they just are, they're just struggling to be able to pay for all of the things that they need to pay for. One of the things that we know is that oftentimes in Detroit, right, there are people who don't live in Detroit who come into the city, which we welcome and we definitely need and want that, who are not paying, right, city property taxes or not paying what did I just say? Property or income taxes if they don't work in the city and if they don't live in the city. But they're using city services, right? They might be using, well, they're certainly using the roads. They're using sometimes police and fire if they're coming for a major event. And we've got cops on the streets who are helping with all the different things that they help with around major events. Like that's all things that the city has to pay for, and oftentimes without necessarily the resources to cover all of this. So that's just an example of why having a local option sales tax could be really helpful. I'm supportive of this idea, and I think it's a really good one because it would give local governments the ability to tailor a local option sales tax however they want, right? It could be like specifically certain kinds of sales where it tends to be people from out of the city coming in and using those products or services, or it could be in certain geographic areas of the city, or maybe it could be, I don't know, just there's lots of different ways that you can tailor it. And there are lots of cities across our country. Well, actually, I will say it this way. We are an outlier. Michigan is an outlier in that we do not allow our local governments to create this option. And I think that's a mistake. I think that we should allow cities to create this option. And if the city doesn't want to, then they don't have to, right? We wouldn't be requiring them to, but it's something that they would have the ability to create a sales tax that works best for them, and then it would have to be like their council would approve it, and then it would go to the voters, and the voters would vote it up or down, right? So there's lots of mechanisms in place to make sure that it's not that it's whatever passes is something that people actually want. Um, so learn more about it, check out those CRC studies, and really really hopeful because I'm really glad that there's been more attention on this issue. Um, because it's badly needed and I think could just do a lot of good. Um, so thank you for the question. All right, I think this will be the last comment that we take today. This comment is from our friends at NAYA. Thank you, NAYA, for all the great services that you provide. It says, good afternoon. NAYA stands for the National Association for Yemeni Americans. And we are grateful for all of the work that they do for behavioral health and human services. Okay, so the comment is, good afternoon, Senator. We are planning 2 town hall meetings regarding the TPS. TPS is temporary protected status. We would be honored to have you as one of the participants. Thank you for the great job you're doing. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Let us know when they are. Would love to be there. If you are reading this and you're like, what is TPS? TPS is temporary protected status for many different countries, including Yemen. Our country decided over 10 years ago to create a temporary protected status. So for people who come here from these countries, including Yemen, we basically provided exactly what it sounds like, protected status. So they wouldn't be targeted for immigration enforcement under previous administrations, or they would be able to have work authorization and basically have basically have legal status while they have TPS. Yes, it is meant to be temporary. However, oftentimes not oftentimes, just always, the reason why this status is granted is because of the conditions in the home country. So in Yemen, when TPS was granted, it was because of the ongoing conflict and health conditions and just all of the issues that are going on in Yemen. Things are not better now than they were when TPS was first granted. So in my view, I strongly believe that ending TPS for Yemenis is wrong, it's immoral, and it's also completely impractical because now we have thousands of people who are here believing that they would have this TPS status protection, who now are facing just this incredibly challenging situation. So grateful to Naya and proud to be able to work with you to try to get this termination of TPS for Yemen rescinded, reconsidered. We instead need to be doing the reverse and actually extend TPS for Yemen, and we'll be proud to continue with you in this fight. So thank you. All right, I think that will be our last comment. Feel free to reach out to us. My team will put in our email address and website in the chat and on the comments on Facebook. So please feel free to stay in touch with us. If there are other ideas that you think of or questions, let us know. And thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you.